who are the next big-time head coaches in college football? You got a bunch of high-profile assistants out there. I cannot remember very many times where more assistant coaches' names were widely known throughout college football. And that means a lot of them are primed for a future head coaching position. So Matt Howe over on 247sports.com today compiled a list. We're going to do the top 7 here, the ones that stood out to me, of assistant coaches that are in line to rapidly elevate to a future head coach. So I wanted to just kind of start with Tony Elliott, and we'll go down the list here. Tony Elliott, you know how old he is, by the way? I'm going to give you the age and salary of most of these guys. Tony Elliott's 41, making $2 million a year to coordinate offense. When you talk to some people in the industry, one of the first things they mention about Tony Elliott is he's very genuine in recruiting. Okay, let me get that out of the way. Tony Elliott's a phenomenally genuine guy in recruiting. Everyone loves him. I cannot find Tony Elliott's biggest enemy speaks glowingly of Tony Elliott. So he's a great guy. He checks all those intangible boxes. But I'll tell you what some people bring up very quickly when you start mentioning him. They say, go back and watch the Ohio State game. Clemson ended up getting beat by him in the semifinal last year. If you've forgotten, Tony Elliott missed that game. He was out, COVID protocol. And the thinking was, oh, don't worry, Clemson's got plenty of time to prepare. And you know, everybody believes that even if a coordinator misses a game, you got some kind of way somehow to communicate, whether it's legal or not. Well, Clemson was not themselves offensively. Ohio State would tell you they had something to do with that. But I'm going to tell you, and more importantly, administrators believe in the sport that Tony Elliott missing in action had a lot to do with it. And so his value offensively, if it wasn't already defined, was defined for a lot of people that night. He checks all the boxes, and he's had chances to leave already. Dabo's been very open about this. Both of his guys this past cycle, Venables and Elliott, had chances to leave. They pay both of them as highly as any program in America. Hats off to Clemson for being serious about football. A lot of other programs would tell you they are. Clemson backs up the Brinks truck anytime they need to. So Marcus Freeman's the next name I want to go to. Marcus Freeman's 35 years old. Got his whole life in front of him, 35 years old. He's been a major riser. He was at Cincinnati. This was a major tug-of-war over the last hiring cycle, let's call it that. You notice how creatively I get around using the O word on the show, off-season. Terrible word, terrible word. Marcus Freeman looked for all the world like he was going to LSU. And Brian Kelly pulled off one of the biggest moves of his career, and he got him to Notre Dame. Defensive coordinator, formerly at Cincinnati, now at Notre Dame. He's walked in. He's not coached a game in South Bend yet. He is a rock star on campus because he's recruiting lights out. He is their best recruiter since the day he walked in. And I want you to think about what they're doing there. Clark Lee left and took a head coaching job in the SEC. That's what they're replacing. That's supposed to leave a big void. And I'm not down in Clark Lee at all when I tell you no one up there even misses him because they found a high-quality candidate to replace him. Again, that's not easy to do, but Brian Kelly pulled it off. Recruiting at a high level, but also his messaging, everything about himself, if you want to call him a brand, it's all A+. You don't sacrifice one on-field aspect to get the other off-field aspect. Next up is Dan Lanning, another defensive coordinator. Got quite a few DCs on this list. Dan Lanning is at Georgia right now. He's the defensive coordinator there. He's 34 years old, making $1.7 million per year. Dan Lanning is in an interesting spot. I would compare the spot Dan Lanning is in right now to the spot his head coach, Kirby Smart, used to be in. He's in a very safe space. See, at some places, you want to strike while the iron's hot because your star may fade and you don't want to miss your window. And that's true 95% of the time. But sometimes you find yourself at a program where you're going to be in the window for a long time because Georgia's never going to be bad. They're always going to have enough talent to where they're not going to be bad. So Lanning could be I'm not comparing Smart to Saban. I'm saying the caliber of the program he's under is a lot like when Kirby was at Alabama. He could just afford to sit around and wait forever and make a healthy amount of money per year with a fraction of the responsibilities of a head coach, and he got to handpick his job. Dan Lanning is going to get to handpick his job. A lot of these guys are. But Lanning's looking around right now, and he's had opportunities too, but he's saying, I'm going to have opportunities every year. And I'm making, again, $1.7 million a year to live in Athens, GA. Nice place to live, great program to be a part of. And if it comes along, it comes along. I'm not in any hurry to get out of here. By the way, I'm 34 years old if I'm Dan Lanning. I'm not 54, I'm 44. I'm 34 years old. So who follows him is my next question. If Lanning leaves after this season, if he gets a big-time job offer, he takes it. You notice Will Muschamp just hanging around up there? Will Muschamp, I don't know how widely known it is, had an offer himself, big-time defensive coordinator offer recently. Turned it down. To be what? Well, to be an analyst who has briefly taken an on-field role at the University of Georgia. Now, he's making all the buyout money in the world, so Will Muschamp's not hurting for money. But you would think, oh, a grinder, a football guy, doesn't he want to coach football? He does. But Will Muschamp's playing the longer game. I think he has his eyes on that Georgia defensive coordinator role, and I'm not alone in feeling that, by the way. Alex Grinch, next up. This is another guy that can afford to bite his time, and he's 40 years old. He's the DC at Oklahoma. He's making $1.4 per year. Very similar spot to Tony Elliott. Alex Grinch is in a spot right now, the same as Tony Elliott is at Clemson, where you know that your team's going to contend every year. You are in no threat whatsoever of your star fading, and Alex Grinch is entering his money year. This will be the year of Alex Grinch, because this will be by far the best defensive product Oklahoma has had. I think it'll be the best team that they've had under Lincoln Riley, and if it is, you know good and well what the talk's going to be between the Big 12 championship game and the national semifinal. Sure, they'll talk about Lincoln Riley, but the bigger thing they'll talk about is what changed around here. Alex Grinch is what changed. Next question, why isn't anyone hiring him? Well, they're going to. You better believe they're going to come after him. So Alex Grinch is in a really good place, too, because, again, he's 40, and so this is his biggest season coming up. He's been very smart, even if there have been offers come his way. He's been very smart, and it's going to be a good year for him. What about Rhett Lashley? This is the one that's most interesting to me. Rhett Lashley is the offensive coordinator down at Miami right now. He's 37 years old. Miami's private, so we don't really know what the salary is. He's the one who stands the best chance offensively to explode this year, which sounds kind of weird because he was the offensive coordinator at Auburn for a while. So you would think, well, don't we know who he is? Well, the thought about any offensive coordinator for Gus Malzahn, right or wrong, is they're kind of a figurehead. Gus runs the offense. And so people don't really know if they know about Rhett Lashley. And then he went somewhere for a little while and came to Miami. He's in a golden opportunity this year because he's going to have a very, very high-level quarterback, and he's going to have an opportunity to make a name for himself because this is the year a lot of people are circling for Rhett Lashley. If he were to do some big things with Miami's offense this year, building off of last year when they were second in terms of overall offensive efficiency in the conference, then Rhett Lashley would be a name that some people started to circle. Now, I don't know if the biggest of the big-time programs would come along for Rhett Lashley after 1 year like that, but I do think some pretty noteworthy programs would come along for him, and that's expected. That's pretty widely expected. If they do anything worthwhile at Miami this year, it's expected Rhett Lashley will get a shot somewhere. What about Bill O'Brien? That's a weird name to bring up. Bill O'Brien, half of you who tuned out for a little while may not even know he's the offensive coordinator at Alabama, but he is. Bill O'Brien is 51 years old, making a little over $1 million a year. He was at Houston for a while, Houston Texans. And so every time you get fired in the NFL, people say you were a failure in the NFL. O'Brien was like a 500 coach in the NFL, so I wouldn't call that a failure, but you can call it whatever you want to. Here's what people in the college world think. They think it's a miracle what he did at Penn State. And now that you got a little benefit of hindsight, when you realize the abject disaster that he had on his hands there, because he was there post-Sandusky. He was there as it happened and as the penalties were handed down and as the scholarships were ripped from their clutches and as the bowl ban got put in place, and they still won. They were winning games. They were beating ranked teams up there. No shot that should have ever been happening. And he was so good up there and so highly thought of, the NFL came calling, and he was in the NFL for a while. Bill O'Brien will quickly be in the Steve Sarkisian position. If he needs to rehabilitate an image, he's going to do it pretty quickly. Yes, Bill O'Brien will have offers coming up. And Mike Elko, lastly but not least, he's 43, making a little over $2 million per year. He's at Texas A&M. Mike Elko is probably the least heralded big story in college football, because what he's done with Texas A&M's defense is the secret reason that they are in contention for the playoff. They were last year, they will be this year. And I'm not sure, the only reason I put Elko down here and I talked about him last was I don't know what his goals are. All these other guys, I'm pretty confident they have aspirations to be head coaches. Maybe Mike Elko does too. I don't hear as much about him. And he's been around the block quite a while now. He's been defensive coordinator at several places. And I know that it's been a big deal for Jimbo Fisher to keep this defensive staff intact. And he's done it successfully and did it at least one more year. And now he's made A&M a place, and Mike Elko has too, where even if Elko moves on, Jimbo Fisher's going to largely have his choice. He can cherry pick at a national level who comes in there to replace him. But those are some names that if you're following this sport at a more granular level, those are names to be paying attention to, because those are names, and several of them are set to have big years this year, that could be on the move, because just as much as August is about camp intel, December and November, for that matter, is about hot seat talk. And so you will hear some of these names coming up at the worst possible time. And that means when their teams are smack dab in the middle of a conference championship and playoff run.